Hey all, it's Paul from Drums and Rums with the backbeats meets the spirits. We're going all in on drums and rums in this episode. Now, if you want to get on the podcast, here's how to do it. I was at the 2022 Miami Rum Congress, and I stopped by his booth, and he said, "Hey, why haven't I been on your podcast yet? I play drums, and I rum." Guys. So here we are. Our guest not only owns a rum company, but has a vast music background. He's like performed with or produced artists, to name a few, Luther Vandross, Carrie Underwood, and Clint Black. So let me introduce our guest to the podcast, Eric Kaye, owner of Holmes Cay Rum and co-founder of Diner Music Library and the Music Playground Companies. How you doing, Eric? Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
It was destined to be, I think.
it was just a funny, when we ran into each other and we started talking there at the Rum Congress, and it was just, it was like, hey, why don't you? I'm like, it's weird sometimes. I don't know how some folks approach me as far as where do I fall in this world of rum or media of covering rum and discussing rum. And I know I'm not traditional, very where hardcore enthusiasts may get into it. And again, I've always said we can go down that path. We can get real nerdy on either subject, but sometimes it's to those who are not, because I think this is something that, you could probably definitely touch upon, is the enthusiasts are very important to the rum world, right? Because they offer a lot, they have a lot of, they're passionate about it. But there's a whole vast of others who aren't enthusiasts, who only know about rum based on two companies, right? We won't say who, but we know who. And how do you get those folks to come into, as I call it, I'm the shallow end pool guy, right? And I don't mind, now that I've realized, I think kind of where I settle, because again, I talk to all sorts of, rum brands that are in a different scale, but everyone's kind of chipping away at that bigger pie that the two companies that are mostly here, at least in the U.S. So yeah, I appreciate it. And again, it's like, turned out an opportunity to talk music. For sure, dude. I mean, like you said, this podcast was made for you, drums and rums. So
both. This is the one that I don't have to hide my background. You can see all the instruments.
I know. That's it. You love it. So, Eric, yeah. So what I'm going to jump in there first, okay? Because I'm assuming, right? And I think this is probably a safe assumption is you started out with the drums and the music first before you got to rum. So let's start there. And while you're giving us a little rundown on, how you got into it, what's your background, growing up, music in the household, did you go to school for music or, any of those things? I know you got 25 years of writing music for commercials and jingles and shows. So I know you probably have got some really good stories to share. But while you're sharing the stories, I'm going to see, I went and replenished. Right.
Oh, look at that.
Look at that.
Some nice Belize rum.
That's right. So this is the Florida Rum Society there. We stopped by in Altamont Springs in Orlando there. Picked up this bottle here. I haven't opened it yet because I was saving it for a special occasion. So while you're, by all means, grab yourself your own bottle too.
Yeah. Let's see. I don't actually have a bottle at hand. I've got some samples of others. What do I open here?
All right, I'm gonna, for the folks here, I'm gonna go ahead and pop this. I may have to.
Yeah, no, I've got some beautiful Barbados rum here. I gotta figure out what's wrong with my camera. Why I'm getting such flare effect. It's like J.J. Abrams is directing my computer.
It's an episode of
the lens flare. Yes,
M. Night Shyamalan. Here we go. Okay, let's see. Woo!
So
that was good.
I'm going to do it old school since I don't have a glass down here. So, cheers.
Cheers, Eric. There you go. Right from the bottle, man. You're a beast.
Nothing like 120 proof right out of the bottle. Ooh. Oh, it's good rum. So you're drinking is that the 2006 or the 2008?
It's 2000. Excuse me, 2008.
Eight, yes. So
Yep.
that's the 14-year-old Belize, 61% ABV,
Okay.
fully tropically aged and bottled down in Belize.
All right.
And
So again, if you're listening on the podcast here, go over and check out the video of this format here. Again, we're talking about the bottle here I'm holding up, the Belize. As Eric said, 13 year. This is 2008. So we'll talk. We're definitely going to talk more about the rum here in a second here, but we're going to start with music first.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, third generation professional musician. My father was a jazz pianist who was with Buddy Rich and played with Stan Getz and Dizzy Gillespie. And his father was lead alto with Benny Goodman and Tommy Dorsey back in the 40s. So, like way back, he played back with Frank Sinatra at his debut at the Paramount. And so lots, it was definitely in the blood. Did not plan to be a musician. I went to college. I was going to take some music classes, but I wasn't going to major in music. And then I said, well, you know what? I'll major in music, but I'll also major in math. And then I said, okay, so I'll do a major, but I'll get a real job afterwards. So I graduated college and I got a job working for what's now Accenture. It was
Okay.
back then Anderson Consulting.
That's right. They had
Doing
they had to rebrand after a little bit of some
yeah,
things.
after Arthur Anderson went kaput. I did that for about a year, and it was really a great experience because I knew I would rather starve than work in corporate America. So I quit, bought a ticket to Southeast Asia. And this was 1993, a long time ago. And I just spent 3 months wandering around Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore in the pre-internet days. So
Wow.
you were able to get off the grid back then. And then came back and started interning for a music production company in New York City. I said, I'll work for free. Let me learn. And I slept on the couch in the studio and joined a gym across the street so I could shower, and definitely paid my dues for a good 6 months of that. And by the end of that 6 months, I started winning jobs, winning commercials and advertising jingles. And it was cool. I was like 23, and all of a sudden I see like a Pepsi commercial that I'm playing guitar on with Kramer from Seinfeld. And I'm like, wow, this is really cool. And I'm getting paid for this. And never looked back for, a good 25 years. Literally written hundreds and hundreds of jingles and, a couple of dozen TV shows and a couple of movies. Put out a few albums over the years. Had a lot of fun playing in a lot of bands, which I'll still do on and off. I don't think I ever sold more than 2,000 records of any album. So that was not my, the rock stardom was not to be, but I've had a really great career as a composer. And after about 25 years of it, I sort of felt like I did everything I wanted to do. There was nothing new. The business had changed drastically now that everybody has a home recording studio. Everybody's got a laptop. It's not the same.
All digital, online. Yeah.
Like in the old days, I would be the composer, so I would write the music, and there'd be an engineer next to me mixing it, and then I'd call up, the Rolling Stones horn section to come in, or Steely Dan's band to come in and play the stuff, and you'd get, Luther Vandross would come in and sing it, and that was a lot of fun. Those days of the recording studios in the 90s. And now it's, sitting at home in your laptop playing everything, and maybe you'll get, a violin player in Ukraine to send you a track. And it's just it's not the same studio hang that it used to be.
It almost sounds like, we just went through this last 3 years or so, right? Is the pandemic, and it's almost like how everybody was working from home, and, you lost something being in the office, right? And, because there's still a collaboration, there's still energy being with people, and yes, could you still do a lot of this stuff? I mean, that's what I always said. Working remote and video conferencing, it's not a new thing when the pandemic hit, right? I mean, other than broadband and whatnot, but it's not a new thing. So yeah, I think a lot of the old ways of kind of looking at it is it's give and take. I think to your point there, right? You're in the studio there. Everyone's focused on one thing. Everyone's in the place, in the building, and as opposed to worrying about the doorbell ringing, while you're, the Amazon guy's here or the dog's
Yeah.
barking or
The air
distractions.
conditioning kicks on, and
Yeah,
there goes your
yeah.
mic.
I don't know how many times. I don't know how many times like I got to turn the fan down and I have to sweat in the room here because the microphone's picking up the air, the fan. But so yeah, so okay, so let's take a pause there. So go back. So where did you go to school?
Reminds me of a great story as well.
Yeah. So where did you go to school?
I grew up in New Paltz, New York, which is about an hour and a
Oh,
half north
SUNY.
of New York City.
I,
Yeah, there's a SUNY
I've
there.
believe it or not,
Did not
Eric.
go to college there, but I grew up there. I
Okay,
went to high
so
school there.
I know I've been to New Paltz, believe it or not,
Mhm.
and it was for a work thing, and great little town, great little village, and
Great
all,
little mountain town in
yeah,
the Hudson Valley.
all,
But I went to college in Western Massachusetts, a little school called Williams College. Um, Great place. They were small school, Div 3 for everything except for skiing and squash. Neither of which I really did competitively. So I played ultimate frisbee there, which was a lot of fun. Rum, I first discovered at the age of 16, so it was not quite yet legal, but I was in the Bahamas, so it, kind of international waters applied a little bit, maybe. If you could see over the bar, they would serve you.
so
Uh,
your first rum store isn't like most people where it's unfortunately their first rum store is probably with started with a B, or even more people probably say and admit to the first rum that they ever had, and this is why they have such a bad connotation about rum is because they had it from a bottle that's white and the name
uh-huh.
starts with an M, right? But
Well,
I'm sure that's not your case though. If you're
no,
describing your
my
story here,
first rum drink was a Bahama Mama, which was amazing, and then a rum punch, and it was light rum, dark rum, coconut rum, Nassau Royale, which they don't make anymore. It was this great vanilla liqueur and a few juices in there. And I was sitting on the beach. You got to go with a bunch of friends, which, can you imagine today a bunch of 16-year-old kids flying down to the Bahamas by themselves?
no way.
And that was the 80s. It was a wonderful time. Um, so that was where I first discovered rum. And then off to college where rum didn't really show up for a few years because it was keg beer for 4 years.
Right.
And, the cheaper, the better.
Right.
Um, and then I got back in once I graduated and became an adult and had my own blender. And that's when I discovered, banana daiquiris and frozen daiquiris and, lots of Bacardi because that was the rum that was available back then.
Right.
We are really in the golden age now. The amount of rums that are available and the choices, if, 10 years ago, 80% of these did not exist. They were not here. There was no Foursquare. There was no Hamden. There was no Worthy Park. There was no Plantation even really 10, 15 years ago.
And let's pause there, Eric, right? So what you're describing there, those brands that 10 years ago, 20, further back, I mean, not really relatively that long ago, these were companies that are as some see as some of the big pillars of the rum world, right?
Yeah.
Because there were, most there you named her in Barbados. So, yeah, other than outside, or not outside of Barbados, yeah, there was nobody knew who these companies were, right? So,
No, you go to a liquor store and there'd be 4 or 5 rums if you were lucky. There was no Agricoles. There was, maybe you would get Appleton if you were lucky, and Mount Gay, maybe if it was a place that had a lot of sailors. But there was, nothing from anywhere outside of the Caribbean. There would be I couldn't even really get much Dominican rums or Puerto Rican rums. Or,
would you think Gosling's fall under that?
Gosling's was around. Zacapa was around. Started in the early '90s, I think. But then you'd go to the Caribbean diving and you'd see every country had its own rum. There was Abuelo down in Panama. There was Pussers, which had been around for a while. So there were rums. We weren't getting many of them in the U.S. Of course, Captain Morgan's, Myers, Malibu, which is not a rum, but everybody thinks it's a rum.
Right.
It's too low ABV to actually be a rum. It's a rum liqueur. But yeah, now it's a very different world. So
So
I remember.
yeah, so so that part before we switched over to the rum.
Yeah, we're gonna go back and forth
Yeah,
music
okay,
realm.
okay.
Like it's very schizo, but
So yeah, so after, like you said, you kind of like, all right, I feel like I've done everything I wanted to do fully in
right.
the music industry. Yeah,
Hmm.
let's talk a little bit about that. These companies, though, you still are owner and involved in music, though,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I still am an owner in a couple of music companies that still produce music for advertising and television. These days, the composing is done by people 20 years younger and much cooler than me. You really composition is still really very much a young man's game for
Mm.
advertising. Is you really need to know what is happening, and with the proliferation of 140,000 songs a week coming out on Spotify,
Right.
I can't keep track,
Yeah.
and I'm not living in that world. So
Mm.
there are people much more attuned than me, and they're the ones who should be writing the music. And I'm just sort of lending my grandfatherly experience on how not to get sued and, how to negotiate the contracts fairly. And I'm far less creative than I used to be, sadly, but
Mm.
I'm channeling the creativity towards rum.
So since when you're talking about, some of the things you're doing in during that time, you talked about jingles, and it came to me. I
Yeah.
was like, we could talk offline. I'm going to offer. I'm going to ask you now. Don't have to answer because I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'll throw it out there. What's your thoughts about writing a jingle or intro or music for the Drums and Rums podcast?
Ooh,
So think about
yeah,
it. Think about it, and like I said,
I,
do
I
it.
would,
Yeah, okay. Like I said,
yeah,
like I said, I do use a song. I think you do know, and
yeah.
luckily, I do have a handshake agreement. I'm sure you're probably this is where you're going to tell me I shouldn't have a handshake agreement, but I have a good friend here, also a podcaster here in South Florida, that has a soloist and has writes music, and the song is "Once Upon a Bottle of Rum," and it was about
Hmm.
his time being on cruise ships, and but anyway, so I was just throwing it out there.
Yeah,
I'm
no, if you have a gentleman's agreement, that's fine. He's
yeah,
not going to sue you.
yeah,
You generally only get sued if there's money to be made. And unless you're raking in, a couple of $100,000 a year in sponsors on your podcast,
yeah.
there's
We're not there yet.
not yet,
Yeah,
not yet.
not
But
yet. Yeah.
I mean, even in music for television shows, you don't run the risk of lawsuits as you do in advertising,
Mm.
because that's where you get into the big bucks. If somebody steals your music for a Pepsi commercial, you're looking at, a significant settlement.
Hmm.
So, having your music stolen, people always like, oh, worried. It's the best thing that can happen to you, to
Yeah,
have somebody steal your music, especially if you can prove that, you
it's
wrote it and there's a chain, or if you've copyrighted it, thankfully. I mean, they can't rush to settle quick enough.
right. So I don't know if you've heard of this. Maybe you have. I'm sure you have. Um, I saw there was a company or some an app or some service that was starting to copyright drum beats. And
Mm,
I don't know how that's, again, it's like guitar. There's only so many chords. And again, have we written every possible song and chord, in mankind? And, of course, you're going to have some overlapping. And, Ed Sheeran, I know that was, he got,
yeah,
nailed for a lot of stuff. It's like, yeah, you're going to be influenced. So you're going to pick up whether you truly believe what they're saying, if it's truly non intentional or total blatantly ripoff. But
it's getting worse. The amount they're suing for, like anything that even remotely sounds like it. It used to be a much tighter sort of
mm,
barometer of what
right.
you could sue on, and now with the Robin Thicke lawsuit a few years ago
Mm.
with the Marvin Gaye law, it wasn't the same song. It just sounded like it, and he lost. So that really kind of opened the floodgates to a lot more lawsuits.
I
Um,
I wonder with everyone selling their catalogs and the musicians turning it over to whatever the BMG or the big companies
mhm.
is that's big money that they're going to protect their interest now. Whereas
Oh yeah.
maybe the artist may not have cared as much okay, you borrowed, or maybe you did, or it's close, but yet these big companies are now going to go after you because they're big companies, right?
Well, I remember back, 20 years ago, Billy Joel used to get sued 5 times a year and I would say they were all frivolous because he doesn't need to steal. He just, generated music out of his head,
Mm,
and he would just settle them. He would throw 50,000 a pop just to make it go away and chalked it up to that's the cost of being Billy Joel.
hmm,
It's people will sue you if you're big because you have a lot of money, and
right.
you know, I, people weren't suing us really.
Yeah.
Well,
Think.
although, we did have some people actually, no, can't say never, but we were never, never went to court and we never lost
So that's
because
good.
we didn't steal.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's tough. So yeah. So that's so you still, as you mentioned, you still involved with the two companies, and they're specializing in publishing, and again, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
kind of as you said, your 25 years of your experiences and things to offer to others, and grandfatherly, as you mentioned, for
Yeah.
those that are coming up, hey, you should look out for this. It's kind of like I don't know. Yeah, it's. Let me ask you: is there a generational thing working with younger artists that is like old versus new? Don't tell me, or you don't know, or do you ever come across that?
Oh, well, I mean, not really generational with Don't Tell Me in
Mm,
terms of music because they don't really have the knowledge and experience of, how it goes down. Like George Michael went after us once
mm,
because we had to it was Chase Banks commercials 10 years, 15 years ago now, where they did the song Freedom,
mm,
which we wrote that arrangement for, and we had to get it approved by George, and we wrote the, Freedom,
mm.
and he approved it because we had to clear it with George. And it went on the air, and he flipped out and he says, I don't know what you put on the air, but it's not what I approved. It sounds nothing. It sounds exactly like me. I never would have approved this. And thankfully, we had the chain of exactly what we sent him and what went on the air. And the only different was like a drum fill that got moved 2 bars for time. But, we're like, George. And, uh, yeah, so that kind of thing happens.
Wow.
So the fun under the seedy undergarments of the music business.
Yeah, those are stories that people are like, yeah, we didn't know how crazy its music industry is almost
Oh
as
yeah.
it's probably one of the worst. But
And then there was another one with was it Carnival Cruise? One of the cruise lines used the Iggy Pop song "Lust for Life,"
yes.
and we did all that music, and we got sued by Iggy's publisher because our music, was Lust for Life, the original part, which led into the Iggy.
Hmm.
And we're like, that was the direction the agency gave us, and we pulled up the emails that said all Iggy all the time. The agency had to eat that one.
Wow. Yeah.
But
So
yeah,
yeah. So the okay. I guess that's right. It never comes into. I'm trying to now think about the commercial. Yeah.
that
That's
the big drums, and we had
yeah.
to write 20 or 30 seconds of Iggy style drum intro to seamlessly merge with the music. And he was claiming he didn't give permission for that,
Oh, jeez.
which he may not have, but that was the direction we were given by the agency. So
Right. And that's like I said, the dirty side, not well, the less glamorous side of things, right, is the artist may have no idea about it because all these
right,
deals with all these managers and publishers and people that they're getting paid for
yeah,
is, and so they're not communicating with the original. Which again, at the same point, like I said, once these people start selling their catalogs, you ain't gotten a leg to stand on no more because you just got $500 million for your catalog.
yeah. I don't blame them. You know what? Why not? If I had a $300 million publishing catalog, I would take that. Someone's going to offer me that money.
Oh yeah, so it's
I'd buy a lot of rum
I
and a couple of nice guitars.
I like your priorities. So yeah, sorry. So now flipping back and forth there with the rum kind of going into some of that is yeah. So you were your first, as you mentioned there, going down the Caribbean and as a teenager and get exposed to it. And how did you come back to rum?
It was actually 20 years ago. It was 20 years ago this month, I think. Really is when I mean, I'd been drinking it more and more as I had more disposable income and would be traveling down to the Caribbean. But even then, it was, Pussers and Zacapa and, the good rums you could get when traveling. And then 2003, I took a trip to Barbados and Guyana just because time I was dating a airline pilot and she was flying to Guyana and she was complaining, oh, it's awful. There's nothing to do but, drink rum and look at the waterfall in the jungle. I'm like, it can't be that bad. So I went down and the rum was incredible. But there wasn't a whole lot to do in Georgetown, which was the capital city. So we hopped on a quick flight up to Barbados for a couple of days as well. And 2003, if anybody knows their Barbados history, it was the 300th anniversary of the founding of Mount Gay. And they came out with their special tricentennial rum that year, which was the first rum back then, I think it was $60 or $70, which was a lot back then. Might have even been more. It might have been $60 a glass at the.
Oh, jeez.
It wasn't cheap, but it was incredible. It blew my mind. I'm like, this is, the best liquid I've ever drank in my life. And then hopped back to Guyana and found a bottle of the El Dorado 25-year in the duty-free shop. And I'm like, whoa, this is not, like any other rums I've ever had in my life. And that's when I really started to get more serious about seeking out these ultra premium, amazing expressions. And I kept finding that most of them were not available in the United States. A lot of them all just went straight to Europe or were bottled in Europe. There are some great Cuban rums which never left Cuba. Right. A lot of things. So
do you think that? So was that because the palate in the U.S. there wasn't the demand or no knowledge of it yet, or was there something more about a governmental trade and tariffs and things like that?
A little bit of both. 200 years ago, rum was America's spirit. There were hundreds of distilleries in New England making Medford rum, New England rum, New York rum, and then the whole American Revolution came along and, rum was British. So we got to get rid of that British rum garbage and make our own spirit. We'll make whiskey, we'll make bourbon. And for a good 150 years, nobody touched rum again until the tiki revival with Don the Beachcomber. And, those guys started making the whole tropical exotica and pina coladas and all those drinks.
Right.
Going to Cuba with travel, rum started to get popular again. Bacardi and the Havana clubs. Mm-hmm. So it's still, on the climb. Whereas Europe never really stopped drinking rum. The British Navy tradition up until 1970 were given their daily ration of rum.
Right.
So hundreds of years they were drinking. Every British Navy soldier got his daily rum ration.
It's funny because I had 2 years ago. It was a Father's Day thing, and I said, let me sit down with my dad. It was kind of an interesting thing, and we were talking. He goes, "Well, I don't know anything about drums." Oh no, he says, "I don't play the drums," but he tells me the story. Like I think this. I told him, I said, "This is the first time you've ever told me." She goes, "Oh yeah," because before we started, the show here, I told you that I was originally from New Jersey, and he said, "Oh yeah, I've seen Buddy Rich," and I go, "What?" I'm like, "You're just telling me this now? You saw Buddy Rich perform?" Like, again, back in the 70s when we lived up in the, the New York, New Jersey area. Yeah. I go, "What?" But then he says, not about rum, but yet how in the, and they were, both my parents are from Scotland, and he said, yeah, rum was like the main drink, in the UK. Yeah. Scotch is, there's probably more people that drink Scotch outside of Scotland than they probably do in Scotland,
I think so.
So yeah, to your point, that whole British Navy, the trade, the obviously here in the Caribbean and moving stuff back and forth, the trade. So it's kind of an interesting thing is, the perception people have today of where rum is popular doesn't necessarily mean it's in the Caribbean.
No,
It's all
England and France. France is one of the biggest consumers of rum, and people don't think of France as a rum drinking country. It's, wine and brandy and cognac and harmony, but
right.
you got to think France still has Guadeloupe and Martinique
Hmm.
and Reunion and all these rum producing territories that, there's a voracious appetite for rums in France.
It's yeah. So you probably Nud Strand,
Of
and
course.
he hit me up and he's like, hey, I'm going to be at the Paris Rum Festival. I'll do a little tour through there, and I was like, holy shit, that is a massive fest. I
Yeah,
was
it's the
like,
biggest one.
to your point, it was like, so again, that was over on YouTube if anyone wants to watch it. But he just kind of walked through, live streamed it, and it's like, wow. Again, perception. It's like you said, people
Yeah.
think that it's just a wine or certain things in France. But I'm like that looked like that he was walking around that park there they were at, and or whatever it was. I was like, it looked like it was like Disneyland. They're walking from this building into that building. I'm like, this is like Rumland. Eric, there we go. That's what we got to open up. We're opening up
Rumland.
a theme park here, Rumland. There, you heard it first.
I like it. I love it. Let's do it.
There you go.
Which island is the question? Where do we put it?
No, we can have different islands, right? Like Disney. Or wait, we just got sued because we just mentioned Disney, and so don't.
Well, Mickey Mouse is now public domain.
Well, I don't know. Here in Florida, there's we got a lot of controversy around Disney and in Florida here with our governor. So we're going to probably end this talk because
that's way above my pay grade.
Yeah, I'm gonna get in trouble talking about this litigation or whatever's going on in Disney and the governor. But anyway,
don't get your podcast banned.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, hey, that bad. Any kind of news, bad press is good press. So. Yeah, so coming back to like I said, the different the palettes are coming out of the islands. There is that you've realized is that there's obviously for your at a minimum for yourself is like, man, this is great. How do I get this? How do I make things easier back home, right?
Yeah.
And there's still like that today. Even the rum that's being produced here in the U.S., it's hard to even get stuff even across the country because of our some of these laws that we have and. Which is kind of crazy, but yeah. So yeah, continue there, Eric, about this bottles and you're finding and taking home with you, on your trip down there.
Yeah, and absolutely is right. The whole three-tier system and every state having its own alcohol laws and need for a separate distributor. It's easier to sell to all of Europe than New York and New Jersey.
Wow, that's crazy.
The EU is just one big market. Whereas you need a separate distributor for New York, one for New Jersey, different registrations, different laws. It's crazy. So anyway, I kept getting these, amassing this amazing rum collection and getting increasingly frustrated that I couldn't get any of the rums I wanted in America. There were these great rums coming out because then the internet was around, so you could see what people were getting in Europe and then I kept seeing these Vellier rums, this name Vellier. Who are these Vellier guys? Everybody's talking about them. This was 10 years ago. And Foursquare was sort of getting popular back then as well. And they, in America, they had put out their port cask and their Zinfandel cask. This was about 6-7 years ago now. Which were $40 a bottle and 40% delicious. And now if you can find one, it's $1,000.
Wow.
But they came out with a rum called Destino, which was a partnership with Foursquare and Vellier, which only came out in Europe. I'm like, okay, that's not fair. Somebody's got to bring this stuff to America. Right around the same time where I read an article by a blogger named Matt Petrick, who's the cocktail wonk,
Yep.
the rum wonk, and who wrote an amazing book on Caribbean rum, his modern Caribbean rum. And he talked about independent bottlers. And I'm like, okay, you can, it's possible. Why is nobody doing this in the United States? And I'm like, oh, because I didn't know anything. I was from the music business. I didn't know about three-tier system and distributors and marketing permits and trucking permits.
And as much as that industry that you're in, there's a lot of that goes hand in hand, right? I mean, of course, there's music and alcohol.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, to your point, you're like, you're so close, but yet there's such another, it's a rabbit
Drink it.
hole.
I didn't know what was necessary to bring it to market.
Right.
It's more highly regulated than pharmaceuticals. Alcohol is. Um, but in the meantime, during that, I found that there was a place in England that would sell you barrels of rum. And I went and I bought 4 barrels of Foursquare rum. And I thought, wow, you know what? I'll put 2 in port casks and try and recreate the port cask rum, which I can't get anymore. And I'll release 2. And if nobody buys it, I'll have enough rum to last me the rest of my life. So I thought, no lose. And, fortunately or unfortunately, they all sold pretty quickly. So, here we are 3.5 years later, and the company has kind of grown to a couple of casks of Foursquare to, now bringing in rums from 10 or 11 different countries and um, having a relatively known brand in the rum world. It's kind of
Yeah.
humbling and bizarre to me because I still consider myself on the other side of the fence, looking for the cool rums to find and drink.
Right. Yeah. And that's, things like, let's give a shout out there to, the Florida Rum Society, and, at least I'd say
Yeah.
Jay and everybody. Right. And don't want to,
Mhm.
alienate anybody, but, um, and, the Florida Rum Society kind of corralling, and working with and, creating an avenue for, companies like yourself and, to get into places. Cause yeah, like you said, that 3-tier system, is very controlling,
Yeah.
and very not open to enthusiasts who want to try new stuff, right? And that's Eric. I mean, again, I know a lot about
Mhm.
now, about the industry and all the challenges, and even like here, 2 years ago, they've passed a law in Florida, letting distillers sell on their own property, and open up that ability to sell more, or well, they always could sell their bottles
Right.
at the distillery, but what they couldn't do was actually sell like a drink or a cocktail and so forth. And part of it was they had to source so much by a certain year. The products had to be from Florida, right? Which I think that's fair, right? But obviously, who's against this new bill or law that's supposed to be a benefit for somebody who makes a product, right? It's almost
Yeah.
like you make something.
Distributors don't like that.
Yeah. So, but yeah. So, as you said, it's like kind of a crazy thing is some of those challenges trying to get products into there. So, um,
What's
yeah.
amazing is that there's a tremendous amount of parallels between what we're doing in rum and what I did with bands and the record side of things. The first time we had a rum, I loaded it up into the back of my car and I drove up to Rochester and, I poured it for, 3 or 4 people. And then they liked it. And I came back to Rochester 6 months later on the tour and suddenly there was 20 people there. And suddenly, you moved up from your self-released record out of your backyard to having a small indie label distributing you. And, my friend says you're like the cool unsigned indie band right now. And we don't want to go to a major label. We're
Right.
not ready. We don't want to get buried with one of those big national distributors or taken over by Diageo or distributed by Southern or Republic or
Mm.
we're not that size. We're a small little rum company that, curates and has, a couple of people working that want
Mm.
to get rum out to everybody.
All right. Well,
Um, I
I
never had pretensions of getting Ryan Reynolds money or Patron, The Rock. I just
I
wanted to
know.
bring cool rum to people.
Yeah. So pin this because I don't want to get too much into details, but I mean, I've been working with somebody who, and again, we're just been partners in certain things, social media, certain things. There is a distributor here in South Florida, that's a spirits distributor, and maybe make the introduction. They are a little bit more boutique and a little bit more sales focused, and uh, like I said, we could talk offline.
Yeah,
If
well, I mean, we have a wonderful distributor
yeah,
in Florida
okay,
now,
okay,
actually.
okay, yeah,
So, well, as we're growing, we're moving to more
mm,
traditional distributor relationships. But again, these are sort of the cool indie label distributors. These aren't the majors. These are the people that really care about,
right,
their products. It's not numbers to them. Our distributor in Florida they were Progress. Now they're called Maverick.
okay.
And they do a great job. A really good team.
And
So
and some of those distributors, as you mentioned there, they're just like the big rum brands, right? There's
yeah.
the big behemoths, as you mentioned, a couple of the other names there on the largest scale, like the Southern. Yeah, so there's a lot of interesting parallels with some of those aspects.
And they'll buy some of the cool indie labels too. Just like Sony will snap up, Interscope or whatever. A lot of the cool distributors will get picked up by the larger
Right.
distributors. So there's so many parallels for the record industry.
So you didn't get into again. You explained why you got into rum because you were at a minimum was wanting this for yourself, right? And to get your hands on stuff, good stuff that is coming from outside the country. But like we said, if somebody comes along and is going to offer you $500 million for your catalog, I'm sure if there's been lately some companies that are getting bought out by some of the larger brands. I'm sure you wouldn't say no to that either.
I don't see that happen. I mean, we're so small. When you talk about the companies that are getting bought, they're doing tens of
Mhm.
thousands of cases, and our volume is, minuscule compared to that.
But if
We're just
somebody
punching
came
way
knocking, but
above
if
our
somebody,
weight. Yeah.
Eric, if somebody came knocking though, you wouldn't say no. Is for the right amount of money, right?
Yeah, I mean, nobody would. But I have no intention at this point in
Okay.
time.
Okay. Fair.
It's such a hypothetical.
Yeah.
I don't expect anybody to offer me a lot of money for our little cool brand.
Okay.
Um,
That's fair. No, that's
but
fair. That's fair.
never say never, but I don't expect it to happen. Rum is not bourbon. Rum is not tequila. Rum is still,
Yeah.
a minuscule if you have the spirits market, which is here, and then you've got the rum market, which is this part of it. And then of this part, that much was Bacardi
Hmm.
and Captain Morgan. So you've got this much of the whole spirits is all of rum. And that includes, the big Appleton, Mount Gay, Foursquare,
Right.
in that little bit right there. And we're like a speck on a speck of that.
Yeah.
So it's not like a tequila brand that you're going to sell for $1 billion. I don't see it ever becoming that.
Well, I read something that, and I could maybe I misread it, but I thought that tequila was going to be going through a little bit of some challenges, obviously with a lot of drought, and obviously it takes 7 years to grow the agave. So again, you've got to be very forward thinking. Sugarcane grows like wild, in certain
Well,
areas.
I just heard that they're changing the tequila rules now to
Yeah.
allow use of other agaves in addition to the
Oh.
Weber. They're going to allow some Espadín, which is using a lot of mezcal because they're running out of agave to make tequila.
So hey, let's just change the rules. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what we do. And and I think that right now we're in the golden age of rum where there's a lot of supply of aged rum um that's going quickly and it's not going to be as cheap and available as it is right now, where
Right.
you can find a nice 15-year-old bottle of rum for like $50, $60.
Yeah, and
Um
there's a lot, and I can't wait to share this with a couple of friends I have that are mostly a bourbon or a Scotch drinker, and some of them, yeah, some of them are blown away, and I know they're definitely going to enjoy this. It's like this, as you hear the same thing, right, all the time. This is
this is rum.
rum.
That's my favorite. So yeah, you had a question earlier on how to get the Bacardi drinkers to grow up and drink more serious
Mm,
rum. And the answer is we're not really trying to get those people. Those people like their Bacardi and Coke, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it's really a good value. But to me, it's more interesting to get the people that drink bourbon, that drink Scotch, that drink brandies, and that don't think of rum as being on that same footing and same level. And to me, rum is as interesting, if not more interesting. To me, it's definitely more interesting than bourbons and scotches. I mean,
right.
whiskey is whiskey. There is a difference between Canadian whiskey, Irish whiskey, American whiskey, but it's all whiskey. And compare that to a Jamaican rum, to a South African rum, to a Martinique agricole. I mean,
It's worlds
it's
apart,
almost
right?
not the
Yeah.
same class of spirit.
Yeah. Yeah, like when somebody's saying, "Hey, what do you name a good rum?" I'm like, "Well, if you're, what are you coming from?"
Yeah.
I will never steer you first right into a agricole because that will turn you away to never to even try even more, right? So it's I've been trying to work through the Rum the A program, and kind of
Hmm.
a little bit more education and teach and or show people and so forth. And it's like, yeah, that's I've got a bottle of Clarion, and I said my wife. I'm trying to even slowly try to get my wife into kind of
Yeah.
get away from the
You don't start with Jamaican rum. You don't start with Claron. I
yeah
mean, you start a Barbados rum is a great entry to serious rums.
yeah
It's a really well balanced. It's not too high ester. Um, they do a really nice pot column blends, both Mount Gay and Foursquare. Um, to me, that's a great gateway into rum. Panama rums are great. The ones that Grander puts out
mm,
are really fantastic and a great value. Also unsweetened. And that's the other problem with rum that's been holding it back is
mm,
there's a lot of shenanigans and, bullshit in the category. There's
right.
stuff that you don't see in whiskey. You don't see fake age statements in whiskey. You don't see added sugars. You don't see added glycerol and vanilla. It just doesn't happen. Um, and that's one of the things that's holding rum back
Mm.
as well.
I mean, okay, so let me take that a little further again, and I know um, your product is for a certain type of uh, enthusiast or consumer.
Mhm.
Um, but there's I think that's that part is how do you even educate others to learn. Say, and sometimes I do struggle with that, Eric, is thinking sometimes people don't care. You
Yeah,
know,
and that's
just
fine.
just let me go up like you said in that analogy. Is sometimes it's not for everybody, and they're going to walk up, Captain in this or Captain in Coke, and because one is it's been ingrained so many years of a super simple thing to ask for, and it's everywhere. But then I got to tell people it's like that's not even really rum. They're like, it's like it's not even 80
They don't
proof.
care. Fireball outsells, Macallan's. That's
So
it's what people sweet sells,
uh,
especially in America.
yeah, and that's why we're all fat and got a diabetes.
It-
So diabetes.
it's true, but it's unavoidable.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a big enough market now with the internet. Everybody can find their band they like. Everybody can find their rum they like.
Hmm.
It's a much more fragmented society. There's not like one TV show that the entire country watches and knows, like
Right.
there was back in the day, or one thriller that 40 million people bought the record.
Yeah.
That's never going to happen again.
No, no. And as much as I always have a love hate about the internet is, all the good that comes with it and the garbage. But it's things like that. Like you said, you're in, Asia in the early 90s before the internet.
Yeah.
And, how do you even know that there's this big world that and because of the internet, we're now connected and we know the things that are out there
Yeah.
and where, which is great because we now live in a small world because of that. The connection of each other and learning about these things
And you can get it. Like, I
right, yeah,
remember traveling around Indonesia and finding this amazing hot sauce, the sambal that I loved, and I put it on every dish I ate. And once I left Indonesia, I could never get it again. Except now you can get on the internet and order it online, and in a week you'll have the Indonesian hot sauce from like the jungles of Borneo. Um, it's it's cool.
yeah,
It's a good thing. The good thing is everybody can make a record at home on their laptop,
mm,
and the bad thing is everybody is making a record at home on their laptop.
fair,
There's
yep,
no barriers to entry. There's no
mm,
gatekeepers. Um, so it's a lot harder to navigate through the hundreds of thousands of garbage to find that one gem, to find that
right.
whoever that magical artist is.
So jumping back to rum now, yeah. So the you like I said you started with your 4 barrels there that you
Mhm.
bought from England. How does talk about how you've go from whether it's Belize or the different places for your select for what you release and it's every year, right? Do you release every year or
Yeah.
what's your cycle roughly?
Every year we put out about 4 to 6 different rums. Um, and then this year we've launched our continually released blends, our heritage blend, and we've got a Fiji blend and some reunion rums coming out next month. Um, but 4 to 6 single barrel releases per year from different countries. After the Foursquare, which, you know, I thought that might sell because at that point they had, 1,000 or 2,000 fans in their Facebook group. So I figured, okay, at least I know of 2,000 people that might buy it. If we get 1 out of 10 of them. And then once those sold out, I'm like, okay, there's a lot of other rums I can't get here. One of them was some great stills from Guyana, the Port Morant still, which was really not available here. It was an amazing, a almost like a Isla malt, this rum, a really distinctive wooden pot still. And then Fiji rums, which nobody was really bringing in at the time. And Fiji rums were phenomenal. I had a Samaroli, which was a Scottish-Italian independent bottler. Italian, I think, but it was bottled in Scotland. And this Fiji rum was incredible. I'm like, wow, never. So when I found a barrel of that Fiji rum, I'm like, let's put that out. And then we had 3 rums out, and I flew over to England for the rum festival. Not to present or anything, but just to
observe,
be a rum tourist.
Right.
And I found the Travelers Distillery in Belize. They were there. They had a stand, and they had some great rums. There was their special Dono Mario, anniversary edition, and I'm like, this is great, but it's 43%. I would love to try something stronger. Can I come down and visit? They said, sure, come down to Belize. And I'm sure they say that to a lot of people, but a week later, I hopped on a plane and flew down there to meet them. I toured the distillery, and they were kind enough, the Perdomo family, to let me just try some barrels in the warehouse. And I was blown away because in Belize, they drink rum at 36%. It's weak. That's the way Belizeans like it. And I was trying this stuff out of the barrel at 60, 63%. I'm like, I want to put this out just like this. I just want to bottle this. And they're like, you're crazy. You can't drink rum at 61%. That's undrinkable. But they let me do it. We bottled it down there. I shipped glass down to Belize, and we, did a joint bottling, fully aged down there. And it got all this press and Rob Report and Esquire, and they're like, wow, this Belizean rum is incredible. And the next thing you know, they were putting out a rum at 64%, a special anniversary edition. But I really love going down there. It's a wonderful distillery, wonderful people, with wonderful rum, which you're drinking right now.
Right. So Eric, what would be I guess what prevented, or just because they didn't think that there was a market in the U.S., or is it because you're based in the U.S., you can bring stuff in, and I guess how does that work, right?
Nobody still, 4 or 5 years ago, when I was doing this, nobody was really doing this in America. Nobody was independently bottling rum. They'd been doing it in Europe. They'd been doing it with whiskey here, but really, and in the last 5 years, there's been, a lot more people getting into the independent bottling in the United States. But 2018, there really wasn't. So people weren't going down to Belize and saying, hey, let me bring your barrels up. And they weren't exporting to the U.S. because if you ask any foreign brand, they've always been told, don't go into the U.S. It's a nightmare. It's a hassle. You need to have a lot of money for marketing. You need to deal with 50 different distributors or an importer. So they don't even think about it. And they tried selling their 1 barrel rum in the States and didn't have a whole lot of success because you need, at that price point, is much more competitive price point, and you're competing with, the big boys, with Diageo and Pernod Ricard. And unless you have lots of money to spend on marketing, which a lot of these distilleries don't, you'll get your expats, your local Belizeans that are living in Florida that'll buy it. But it's not going to make a dent, and it's not worth the hassle when you've got a captive audience in your own country.
Yeah, and I guess that's as you said there, right? The economies of scale.
But they're very proud of the attention their rums are getting now, and as well they should be, because it's great rum.
So, do you got any hinting, or what can you loosely kind of drop any?
Loosely, yeah. Well, bottling this month, our two first unaged rums. I have some in Florida for you to try? I think I might have under the table, maybe. But
I
one
learned
of my
from that
favorite
I learned from that
distilleries.
event, Eric, was ask for under the table. Like it's like off the
That's the
menu.
key to any rum or spirits festival. Always ask for what you got under the table. And it's even better if you know what they have under the table, because then they're more likely to give it to you.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I hear you got some cane juice stuff under the table. And they're like, shh. So, yeah, one of my favorite distilleries in the world, Savannah Distillery in Reunion Island. Reunion is sort of the French Hawaii. It's a state of France, a department of France, just like Hawaii's a state. But it's off the coast of Madagascar in the Indian Ocean,
Oh wow.
middle of nowhere. And they happen to make phenomenal rum at the three distilleries there on the island. And we were able to bring in two different expressions from them. An agricole, it's one of the 5 places that can actually make EU official rum agricole, because it's French. And a Grand Arôme, which is their high ester molasses rum. And it's a really funky, comparable to a Jamaican, but even more so. It's a molasses rum on their old Saval still. And both of those are going to come, and bartenders and cocktail makers are going to go nuts because the flavors on both of them are just really, really cool rums. So we're bottling them in next week, and we should have them out starting in May.
All right.
Very excited about those.
No, yeah, that's great. So it's different places. I mean, it's kind of I was writing here, looking at my notes there as I'm going through a couple of them. As you're fill out the questionnaire, there was like find amazing rums that aren't available and make them available. And I just put right above the bullet was rum hunting, right?
Yeah, that's what I get to do. 3 of my favorite distilleries just happen to be in Africa.
Wow.
And you don't associate Africa with
No.
rum.
Yeah.
South Africa, Mauritius, Reunion, amazing distilleries that are making spectacular rums.
Again, I don't know if it's sometimes it's is it just the sheer fact of just awareness that we live in a big world here, even though we just said it was small a minute ago. That it's again, is it just a U.S. thing because we live here in the U.S. and most people just we're only as Americans, like it's only this, we don't care about much else, unfortunately. But yeah, like the whole history of how that sugarcane made it through the journey through the Indonesian through basically following the equator across and ultimately into the West Indies and so forth.
Right. It went from Papua New Guinea through Indonesia up through India, across to Madeira, and then from Madeira down to Brazil. So cachaça is older than rum, and then from Brazil it went up to Barbados and Martinique and became rum as we know it.
That's why I would say rum. Rum is so, like you said, it's so much cooler than any other spirit because there's such a history.
It is, but it's also darker than any other spirit.
Tied
in with that is some really nasty stuff in the early history of rum.
Right.
For hundreds of years, it was made by slaves.
Right. Yeah, and I think some whether I think it's good, it's important, maybe not so much to dwell but I think it's one of those. It is part of the unfortunate history.
It's important to acknowledge it and pay respects to the people who rum did not mean a pina colada on the beach.
Right. This isn't as a society and civilization there's unfortunately a lot of things that we don't like about how we got to, or whether it's whether it was in the middle of the East or in Egypt, and and I only make the reference only because it was just recently Easter, and Moses is always on TV, and unfortunate.
And rum was still largely the poor people's drink in the Caribbean. The rich, the wealthy were not drinking rum. They were drinking brandy. They were drinking whiskey. Rum was for the workers. So the whole elevation of rum, as a source of pride now for these countries is wonderful.
And there's been a lot of that talk is every country. This is how rum is, right? To that country and to that country. There's no wrong answer because it's different
There are
different.
wrong answers. I will say there
Okay,
are wrong
yeah.
answers when you have a country where there's a very much defined thought of this is what our rum is, and then a multinational comes in and wants to change those
Hmm.
rules to say, well, let's make rum this way, and slide some money around. That's problematic. And I'm
Yeah.
not going to name any companies or any countries, but it happens.
And that's why, and is the importance of that geographic indication there that they have in
Yeah.
Barbados about the Barbados rum. So,
Well,
uh,
they're still trying to get one in
yeah,
Barbados. Jamaica has one. A lot of countries have one. So hopefully the Barbadians can establish what their GI is. I think they know what they want it to be.
right. And I guess that's why it's in this country. Is that it's very complicated in this country because we don't know, even American producers, what is the rum, right? It isn't like there's American rum because that is based off of many other places that were go back further. It's just that it's produced
Right.
here in the U.S. So the U.S. is what we call the melting pot. So it's maybe a little bit of that. The melting pot
We get
still.
rum from everywhere.
There you go. Do you like that? Do you like where I had it?
Yeah, I do.
Melting
The
pot,
melting
pot still.
pastille. And if you add sugar to it, the word, a lot of people say, oh, I like this rum. It's so smooth. And to me, that's not a compliment. I don't want a smooth rum. To me, smooth rum, I equate to bland. I want a balanced rum. One that, you get a nose, you get a,
Hmm.
a palate, you get a long finish on it. All parts of it work together. I don't want something that slides down my throat.
And
Ooh, it's sweet and
yeah, what was that water?
a candy bar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
To me, a smooth rum is not a good rum.
I,
It can be, but that's not the adjective I want.
it's funny you say that because again, I'm gonna a little confession here. Last night I was out with my buddy and one of his friends, the bartender, had gave us 2 shots of tequila, and it was a certain particular, a little bit better than what's in the well. And when I threw it back, I was like, for a minute there, I said, "What? This is almost like a. It was almost. I thought it was water because it didn't hit me like a tequila or a burn or what. It was
Mhm.
again smooth, okay, but it was like, there's to that point, it's what's the point? And like I said, the cocktail aspect of it is,
Yeah.
it adds, making cocktails and the creativity to add these different, taking the base spirit and then building upon it, and it just makes all. And that's the thing is, I love just being able to maybe not so much drink, what's in the glass here, but
Mhm.
just keep sniffing, and
Yeah, and
you
you
get.
can do that. Like cocktails were not, let's get creative. Cocktails were, let's mask the taste of some really badly distilled alcohol and get drunk without retching.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
so
you don't mean you don't like rock gut?
no, it has its place.
Yeah,
In the
maybe.
back of a
Yeah.
'83 Chevy, but it has its place, Rock Gut.
Yeah, maybe for filming a western, maybe, but,
I,
but
I, I'm, I think I've grown past my Rot Gut stage.
yeah, you're a little past that. Sorry. So let's bounce back now. Again, we're like
Yes,
ADHD here. We're bouncing all over the place.
totally.
Yeah. So let's go back to music there. All right. So so what I know other than drums, what other instruments do you play? Are you very versed in kind of
Yeah.
wide?
You know, being a working composer in the studio, you pretty much have to play everything. So, uh, my strongest instrument, I would say, is the bass. That I'm at a studio level in any situation. Also, really, guitar played for many, many years. Keyboards, which is, if I look down, you can see the keyboard right there. Um, so, I mean, and then I've got the whole array of mandolins and banjos and bazookies, and um, there's the upright bass behind me. There's some bongos. Yeah. So basically, whatever is needed. I've played sitar on National Geographic shows.
Oh wow,
It's
that's pretty cool.
it's pretty neat. It's in the case. It's a bitch to tune. It's got like 20 strings, and they're all like handmade tuners, and it's a bear to keep in tune, so I don't whip out the sitar that often. but it's fun to play.
I, I've, it's amazing watching people play more modern music on Western or pop music on a sitar. It's like that's actually
Yeah,
pretty cool, you know.
it's fun. It's a fun one. You get to sit on the ground and
And just
so
it's like a total jam session.
yeah,
So the drums. So you're
Mhm.
yeah. Do we take a peek or can you go
Yeah.
mobile? Yeah.
I'm gonna have to disconnect here and walk.
Okay.
So
All
let
right.
me
Let's see. Let's see. Hopefully, we don't lose Eric here.
yeah, there we go. So I'll give you a little
All right. Here
tour.
we
It's a
go.
little dark here of the studio, but so we've got where are we? We've got a wall of guitars right there. It's a little bit of a mess. Here's a keyboard.
So Eric, do
So,
you? I know I'm wearing my shirt here again. I know if you're listening to the podcast that you have to see the video, but do you know your Sweetwater rep by name?
oh gosh, no. They always send me candy though, that's for sure. And then here is the drum room right here, which we have a nice kit there,
Very cool.
which I don't know if you can see it there, but we do have a little kit here. My son has really taken over the drum, so it's set up for him. He's 11, almost 12, and he's the one who really is the drummer of the family right now.
Nice.
That's a little bit. And then we've got the Wurlitzer over there and a guitar. So
Yeah. So full
a
blown.
little bit of the drum kit.
So the full blown studio there, and like you
The
said,
full blown
it's
studio, and
yeah.
there's the electronic drum kit is right there.
All right.
Which doesn't, and then the row of more
Guitars.
basic instruments. So yeah, I'm sorry for you people just listening. You're not getting to see this wonderfully messy room filled with guitars and rums and drums and amps, and it's a little bit of chaos here.
That's why you have to tune into the YouTube to watch the video here. So when we drop the video here,
Right.
so well, very,
So,
so yeah, so I think we were going through Eric is so we were talking through a couple things here, and I know we weaved in between the music and drums and rums, and so at this part of the show here where we get to that part of the segment where I don't know what I'm going to do with you here, so I'm going to give you both of these little intro into the rapid fire segment here. So we're going to go into it first, and we're going to go ahead and give you
in 4 sips or less.
oh, 4 sips or less.
yes. So, but I say in 4 sips or less because now I'm going to give you the other half of it because we've covered both topics, and we're now going to give you the
In 4 beats or less.
That's right. So you are, I think you are now the first that I've actually given the intro there for both the in 4 sips
Wow.
and 4 beats there. So because you accosted me at the Rum Congress and said I'm coming on your podcast whether you like it or not.
I have the drums and the rums.
That's
Come
right.
on. I put my money where my mouth was.
All right. So we're going to start off here. And the first question we ask all of our rummers this question here to start off with. I have a feeling I might know what your answer is, but we'll go on here. So in 4 sips or less, neat or on ice?
Neat.
Okay.
That's not even a question.
All right. So I'm going to go here and give you this next one here. And then, so in question number 2, this is the one that all the drummers get. So in 4 beats or less, who's on your Mount Rushmore of drummers?
Stuart Copeland, Stuart Copeland. Buddy Rich, you got to give it to. Gosh, everybody says Neil Peart, but he's just awesome. Bernard Purdy.
Okay. I don't know if I've had a
Oh,
Bernard Purdy yet on the questionnaires, but the couple of
Bernard
the other
Purdy's awesome.
the other 3 guys I know I did. So, all right. So in our next question here, we're going to go into is let me just transition back here for a second here and update our question there. So number 3 is what we're going to call we're back on in 4 sips or less. And you talked a lot about the travel and the place and so forth that you've been to, you've brought products and you've bottled. But what's that one place that your heart is with on all your travels? Where's that one location?
It's not a rum location.
Oh, okay.
Believe it or not, one of my favorite countries is very much not a rum location. It's Indonesia. I fell in love with that country 30 years ago. Everything about it, the food, it's the best scuba diving in the world, bar down. The people are wonderful. The animals, you've got orangutans, you've got Komodo dragons, you've got incredible creatures under the water. So Indonesia is probably one of my favorite countries to visit.
All right.
It's completely not a rum country because it's it's the world's largest Muslim country.
Right. So,
But Iraq, which is a rum, a sugarcane and rice based spirit, comes from there.
Okay.
Batavia, Iraq.
Yeah. So, right. Because their alcohol is very strict on, right. Well,
Yeah.
The World Cup this past a couple weeks ago or
In
months
Qatar,
ago, right? Yeah. I know they were very strict on that.
Same. But so but I love going to Belize for the people. I love Barbados. I love Jamaica.
All right. So one last one to go here, and this is we're back on this one here. So this is going back. I think we're probably roughly about the same age. We're both originally, from the Northeast and grew up, and so in 4 beats or less, did video really kill the radio star?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. I mean, there were years, and we're about that same age, where you wouldn't listen to the radio. You'd go home and you'd watch MTV from when school was out till your parents said turn off the TV.
Yep.
At least I would. I'd watch MTV for hours a day, and all MTV did was play videos.
Mm-hmm.
It was cool, and there were bands that became famous because of their videos.
Yep.
Because of their music. Like Aha, that was a band that made it because of that cool black and white video.
That was, yeah. I mean,
Robert Palmer, who had been around for years, he did that "Addicted to Love" video with the 4 women standing there dancing, and all of a sudden he was a superstar.
Yeah.
So yeah, you didn't get radio stars like that. Michael Jackson,
Thriller, like you said earlier, Thriller
all the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a video star.
Right.
He was a star before that with his previous album, but when Thriller came out and the Billie Jean video and the Beat It video, bam.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are no more radio stars.
No. So now hopefully they're did podcast stars kill the video star?
Yeah, that's true. Now there's no more video stars either.
Right. It's YouTubers.
It's
right.
TikTok
Yeah.
stars.
Yeah. How many people? How do musicians? Probably only the bigger ones are. And again, making a video, and you probably know this better than I do, is making a music video is a lot of money, especially for a band that's not like up here. And then of course a lot of the back end contracts and record companies and all that recouping that money where. Yeah, no wonder why most people end up pumping gas after,
Great story about a fellow Jersey musician that you'd appreciate. I was actually born in New Jersey, Paul, so
okay.
I do have some Jersey roots. So Pat Denizio, Pat, he was in a band called the Smithereens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they had some hits with their first album, and they hadn't seen any money from the record label. And he called up and said, why haven't we seen anything? He said, well, you still haven't recouped $100,000 worth. So, there's still no money to pay you. And then they came out with their big album with Behind the Wall of Sleep and Blood and Roses, and like 3 big hits. They went platinum. They hadn't seen a dime. And Pat calls up the label and he's like, when are we going to start seeing some money? And the label says, well, now you're unrecouped $1 million. So because they made videos for $200,000-$300,000 a pop and tour support, and it all the label's not paying for this. They're laying out the money and charging you inflated prices. So thankfully he wrote the songs and got publishing money and royalties, but in terms of record sales, they got screwed by the labels, and that's much more common than you'd think.
And that's the like I said, this industry has changed a lot. As you said, with home studios, and people can make their own music now, and very simply and very cheap, and so forth. And just put it out into the internet, and may not be as well as produced and mastered and all that.
Yeah,
It's the
but
other it's the other side
they've
too.
also gotten more aggressive. Like in the old days, you'd sign a record deal and you'd sign a publishing deal and you'd have your merch. And now these entities are doing 360 deals where they own your publishing, they own your records, they own your merchandise, they own your image, and they basically own you, very much American Idol. If they create you, any revenue stream you have, they are the gatekeepers.
Right. Yeah. That show always confuse. That goes to show you how bad people want to be famous, I guess.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I mean, hell, I mean, he's been around now a long time. Like, just the example is, everyone thinks can be a Justin Bieber, right, and be
Right.
found on YouTube and become huge, and it does happen. I do think there is a little bit of an equalizer, as bad as maybe the music industry had screwed over artists.
Yeah.
And again, going back to maybe the similarities is with making rum, or being spirits, is getting really like, wait a minute, I made this. How am I not making the most money out of it, right? I'm the guy who made this, right?
Oh, I'm still waiting to actually make any money at this. I should have stuck to music if I wanted to make money.
All right, so here's a shameless plug for Eric. Eric
Yes,
here.
there you go.
Buy Holmes Cay Rum here. Whatever you can, whichever one you got. So
Yeah, they're all good. And we're now going to be selling it on our website as well, holmescay.com. There's
Okay.
a shop page. So HOLMESCAY.com.
cool. So we've gone through the rapid fire. Let me finish this last part.
Oh, yes.
I knocked a bunch of stuff over earlier, so I had to lean over. All right, so you made it through the rapid fire again as part of now the alum, as I call it, the alum. And again, I always consider everybody part of the crew here. So there you go, your drums and rums. I'll send you out this shirt.
Awesome.
Send you out this shirt there. And as I always tell, as our tagline here, where it's camera there, where the backbeats meets the spirits there. So there you go.
I love that.
Yeah. So
that's awesome.
So again, like I said, I don't have a product. Again, this is the forum.
This is the product.
This is right. Yeah. I sometimes, I don't think about it in that sense. But I always think it's this cool, eclectic group of people, that's why, I don't know if you probably know Don Farmolero. He's the global drum ambassador. That's his moniker.
No.
So he actually lived in New York also. And, so it's funny, is I like, wait a minute, I had Ian on, and he's the global rum
ambassador.
Right. Yes. I said, I gotta have the drum version of this, and he was gonna give me Don was giving me a little bit of a hard time about it's like all the rhyming.
What's his name?
Don Farmolero. I'm saying it, Farmulo. So he's I think he's probably like maybe in the 70s, but he's
How do you spell the last name?
Here, let me see if I can look it up here. I'm probably butchering it. So, all right. So Famularo.
Oh, Dom.
Dom.
He's Brazilian.
Yeah.
Drumming's global ambassador, 125,000 followers.
Yep. So he's performed in New York there, with Buddy, and all the when he was coming up and sitting there at the foot of a lot of those great Max, all those guys, and
yeah,
it was interesting. But he was giving me a little bit of a hard time about how all this rhyming with drums and rums alums, and then and all sorts of things. But it was all fun. That was an interesting conversation where some of the things he was doing with drum teaching and so forth.
Interesting. No.
Yeah.
No dome.
So I'm gonna come back to something here, Eric.
Anybody rich, but
yeah. So you talked about still involved in music. Are you? And again, I'm not sponsored by that. I'm having no affiliation. I always just think it's kind of an interesting platform. Is something called air gigs. AIRGIGS, airgigs.com. So it's and I learned about that from when I went to a drum workshop in Nashville with Jim Riley back in 2019. And he was doing this, I guess, in his spare time and picking up a little bit of money and whatnot, or maybe just the love of doing it. It's kind of like Fiverr. And so, all right, so Eric Kaye, you got a profile out there. Here's my background. Here's my experience. Here's the instruments I play. And
Right.
so let's say if I'm a soloist and I wrote a song and I need a drummer, and I see your profile, so $100 an hour. I'll put drums down to your track. So I send you again. It goes back to that home studio kind of stuff. But I mean, it's for those that are another little revenue stream for others to kind of put themselves out there to make some a little bit of money.
Yeah, I have seen that.
Okay.
And I've used actually that or a similar one. It might even been Fiverr I've used occasionally. And the guys getting the work tend to be Eastern Europeans, at least in the classic, because they are great musicians and unfortunately,
Don't have
they're happy to get a quarter of the amount of money. Which is why when we would record symphony orchestras, we would fly to Prague to do it. You didn't have to deal with the unions, unfortunately, which the agencies didn't want to pay residuals, and we could go to Prague and get an 80-piece orchestra for like, a few $1,000s. So yeah, there are air gigs, but again, I never really used it because if I needed a drummer, I would call Sean Pelton up or somebody like that. And he would come in and, listen to your track once and make a couple of notes on a piece of paper and he would just nail it perfectly. That's what those guys do.
Right.
Urban Purdy, the session guys, it's a different world.
Oh yeah. And that's, And I think it goes back to, and you probably would agree, is that you're talking about, going music education in college was, look, if you do this, you become good at it. You learn. Go to school for music. If you really want to be, before you go to college, if you're a high school kid that really wants to make music your life and your career, go get a music degree. And I know there's some argument about probably that, but at least you could at least parlay it into teaching if you still wanted to do it. And if you're not made as a rock star yet, or writing songs, or and they said the studio aspect has kind of been on the waning side of it, right?
You have to do everything now. You have to be composer, producer, musician, engineer,
and you got to be good at your instrument, right?
You have to be good at all the instruments now. It's a different skill set.
Right.
The days of somebody just being a saxophone player and going on tour, there's not too many of those jobs around anymore.
Right. So, well, Eric, I really appreciate definitely coming on. So, as we wrap things up here, so before we go ahead and wrap here. So, Eric, what do you got? I know you already mentioned a couple things there, but in closing comments, promotion plug, check out where to buy. Like I said, I think you already hit it, but let's go ahead and wrap this back up and tell people how and where and all about how they can get their hands on some Holmes Cay.
Sure, you can get. Thanks to the internet, you can find any music you want. You can find our rum, holmescay.com. I've got several albums on Spotify, but that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, holmescay.com. And we've got a lot of different rums to try. So feel free to experiment. Try Barbados, try Jamaica, try Guyana, try Trinidad. They're all really different and delicious.
Try Belize.
And Belize, of course, and Fiji and South Africa. And the rum world is just awesome.
Very cool.
So thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
Me. It was fun. I got to play a little drums. Hopefully my son won't say, "Oh, Dad, you suck at drums. Why did you play?"
Oh,
okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
He's a better drummer than me.
Do you ever? But you guys jam at least, right?
Oh yeah,
that's cool.
But
yeah.
And the best thing I did was immediately hook him up with one of my studio guys, who's now doing Vegas shows.
Oh wow!
He does his Zoom lesson in from Vegas, and my son thinks he's the coolest. He's a real drummer. Who's like, he was doing the Michael Jackson show in Vegas for a while, and he's playing with someone who he thinks is much cooler than his dad.
Oh.
So it's great.
It's like I said, it's the teenage years where everyone's cooler than their dad, and
Yeah, and then they come back and say, "Oh, maybe Dad."
you weren't so bad.
Yeah, it wasn't so bad.
Yeah, because you're the one giving me the money, I pay for.
You paid for my drum lessons. Yeah. You took me to a concert.
That's right. So, all right. Well, I'd like to thank Eric for coming on the podcast here, talking about Holmes Cay Rum. Again, music to check out. Again, he's not only got some rum for you to buy, he's got some support him as a musician as well. Check out we'll include that on the links here for this episode here. Check out Drums and Rums podcast. Give it a like and follow. Again, a big if you're listening on Apple, please go ahead and give us a review and a rating, because those things do actually mean something when people look at it. Follow us all on social media, Facebook, Instagram, subscribe to the YouTube page there. We're trying to get to 1,000, not because I'm wanting to monetize, but at least to get those numbers up there, getting more people out there to check out, talking to interesting guests and the stories that are behind it, and so forth. Check out the website, drumsandrub.com. And then I thank you all. This have a great day. This is where the backbeats meets the spirits. And, Eric, cheers.
Cheers to you.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for coming on, brother. That's right. Right out of the bottle. Right. Yeah. He's
the bottle.
He can do that because he owns that company. All right, cheers, y'all.
You can do it too. You bought it. You can do whatever you want.
That's true. That's very true. All right, cheers, y'all.
Have a good night.